Namaste and in catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is LaChelle Adkins, who's known as America's Supermom. She's got 15 kids. She's a TV host and producer. She's a community builder, and we're going to find out just exactly what it's like to have a family of her size and to do it eloquently. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're going to love this conversation. So, LaChelle, it is so great to have you here. We've had some kerfuffles along the way, and in spite of the trees and roots, we're planting ourselves well today. So, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited for this conversation because I knew the minute that I met you the first time that you had so much to teach me about, life and how I can continue my journey of growth. So I'm
Well,
excited for
thank you so
what
much.
lies
I
ahead.
feel just the same, because you've got the huge family, right? I
Yeah.
only had 4 kids, went through a divorce, so I really didn't get a chance to be around them and grow and nurture and learn myself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be wonderful, and I really do hope that those parents out there do pay attention because I know you've got a lot of insight and wisdom as to how to nurture your children into their own understanding and knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to
Mm-hmm.
live life fully.
Amen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, speaking of living life fully and how and where you are now, this had to have started early on. I have a sense that you've got really connected to nature, the world, the universe early in life.
Mm-hmm.
What was
Mm-hmm.
that like? Because, we don't have a chance to talk about these kinds of things to others because we're bereft of those conversations from an inner perspective, which is what
Yeah.
I think we're missing in the world today. And I
So,
hope that this podcast or show or whatever you want to call it, apocalyptic chats possibly, we have that opportunity to uncover a deeper side of life that makes it more relevant, connected, and moves the needle a little bit towards harmony among people and planet.
mm.
So, how did it start for you? What was life like?
Yeah, so for me, I was an only child, which is quite an extreme change to now being a mother of 15 children.
Absolutely.
So I think, I really had a strong sense from a very young age of seeking outer validation, right?
Hmm.
I remember at the age of 4 of learning to read. I know the first book, Are You My Mother? And I went to daycare, and the teachers were so in awe. That was the first thing they told my mom when she came to pick me up that day. And from there, that really set the tone for me, seeing how certain things you do can really uh,
Hmm.
garner attention from others and give you the opportunity to get special treatment.
So, what were the comments of your teachers to your mother about you?
Well, they couldn't believe that I was so young, that I was able to read, that I did it all on my own. They were, before she had got there, they kept having me read to the other kids, and it was just a big production.
Well,
And
that's the major kudos to your mom.
hmm yeah, she really valued academics. She was one of 12 children, and
Mm.
was pretty much her way of getting out of humble beginnings because, my grandmother and grandfather divorced when she was a teenager. She went through her mom being a single parent and just the financial uh,
Hmm.
responsibility of that. And my grandmother stayed home with the kids. And
And your mom
so
says,
she did,
I'm going to keep it small.
right. And she valued education where it's like, that was the driving thing for her.
Sure.
So to really hone in on that ability to get attention from her and the praise and everything that went along with it really set the tone for
Hmm.
my whole academic career of being an overachiever and high performer. Um, so I really had a good foundation of imagination, dreaming big. I would say that the only downfall with that was believing that I had to do it alone and I couldn't depend or trust other people to do it with me. There was a
Sure.
lot
Sure.
of
Well, as far as
anxiety
child
around. Mm-hmm,
development, I mean, you were ahead of the pack just because of how you were raised.
mm-hmm,
And at 4, I had I was orphaned at birth and adopted. And it
mm,
wasn't until I was 4 that my adoptive sister came. And of course, when my parents brought her home, it was like, okay, it's time we tell me about adoption.
mm-hmm,
And it was interesting how, even at that time, I wasn't too concerned about my terrestrial heritage.
mm-hmm,
I had been to Sunday school. I was raised United Methodist during that period. And going to Sunday school, it was like, my question was, okay, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them?
mm-hmm,
And it turned out that I could. Actually, they could talk to me. I was standing in front of a window one night, waiting for Dad to come back with ice cream. And it was dark out. And I was
mm-hmm,
looking across the front porch and standing on the landing of a stairway. And all of a sudden, I hear this deep, booming male voice that was like all powerful and yet safe and secure, right?
mm,
And it just simply said, "Hey, you." And I heard it. It didn't frighten me. It
mm-hmm,
kind of startled me, the fact that I heard it and it was so loud. And I spun around immediately to ask Mom, who was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, if she'd heard it too.
mm-hmm,
And she didn't. And I thought, wow, it's so loud. You had to have. But she didn't. And then I realized, okay, there's something else going on here. And I'm not going to deny it happening because I heard it.
mm-hmm.
But that gave me an initial start of, okay, what else is out there? Right? So how did you
Amen.
take that early understanding and what did you notice in your world of the connectivity between how you were thinking and feeling and what showed up in your outer reality?
My mom really poured a lot into me in terms of building up that courage to do hard things,
Mhm.
to be able to navigate in moments where other people may not understand what you're doing. I just that
Unfortunately,
confidence.
most don't because they don't have the inner awareness to do it.
Yeah. And I think just that whole thing of, you know, being okay with doing what's not popular with other
Mhm.
people. She really instilled that at a very young age. And, I really have to give her a lot of credit for that because, it was a challenge having a large family. Every time I would be pregnant with another one, people saying, do you have a TV? Do you guys know what causes this? And all the different comments.
There's
But
so much bias, and
yeah.
I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day, and the facts are, we have this scarcity attitude in the world, right?
Hmm.
Facts are we produce 1.7 times enough food to feed everyone. It's just the
Hmm.
distribution systems are screwed up.
Right. It's true.
So this
And
kind of bias that seems to be continuous is like we're always being put down, follow the pack,
yeah.
go with the group, don't stand alone or you get your, knees cut off,
Hmm.
which happens. You
Yeah,
know, when you do those kinds of things, and especially in organizations, you end up outside looking in, even though you were doing your best inside and was an example to others of it.
yeah, so true. And I think, that is really a very alert and aware revelation around the biases that a lot of people have. Because, if we hear it a lot, we begin to think that something's wrong with us. We
Hmm.
begin to question our own sanity. And I think the thing that really helped to me to understand this whole concept was the book, The Four Agreements, understanding that,
Absolutely.
I would let my voice go in order to blend in sometimes with what people understood, or feeling like, well, if other people don't understand, maybe this isn't the right time, or this isn't the right
Or we
thing
need
for
to
me
figure out
to
how to
do.
articulate it better,
Yeah,
right?
which is
Because
true.
sometimes we
Communication is
speak.
important.
Oh
Mhm,
yeah, you know,
mhm.
in my master's degrees, I had professors say, you know, Zen, you present at a doctoral level, dumb it down. These are working
Right.
people that you're with, and I was there for my own education, not theirs.
Exactly. That mindset right there, understanding that so often we go into a lot of things without the intention and understanding why we're doing it, what the purpose is. We allow other people to uh, dictate what it is that we're supposed to get out of things.
Hmm.
And when you begin to be intentional and understand why things are what they are and how you're choosing to interact with anything, it really is a game changer. And your
Absolutely.
confidence, your ability to communicate, and making better decisions.
Mhm.
If you know that you're in a particular situation for your benefit, or whatever you're looking to get out of that situation, you're able to learn what the distractions are and what are the things you really need to prioritize for.
Oh man, we so need that, and your
Hmm.
attire is a perfect example. This country needs some
Hmm.
authentic integrity.
Yeah,
We don't have it. I mean, look at
right.
this is evergreen, but in the recent past and present, these discussions on political levels are just mudslinging. And why do we tolerate
Hmm.
this? And how can we respect leaders that would do it in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just the conditioning. I really don't watch the news. I haven't watched it in 8 years after, my last hospitalization due to depression. And um, I really have the space to ask better questions as a result of
Mhm.
that. A lot of times when you are fed things so much, you don't even think to ask questions. You believe the opinions
Right,
as being
right.
factual and true.
One of the
So,
greatest
so
minds on the
much,
planet,
yeah, so much gets
Howard
in there.
Bloom, wrote a great
Mm-hmm.
book called The Lucifer Principle.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, he does a scientific study of history and reveals how small groups of people manipulated masses, including entire populations, by telling lies and controlling the media stream.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna
Gosh,
put
when
that
did that
book.
happen last?
And when it comes at you so quickly, your brain is just taking it in, and
Oh,
you're not
yeah.
processing one word that could be incorrect, or one concept could be very small, but it makes a big difference on what your inference would be,
Mhm.
or the next thought associated with whatever was said.
And you
So
can create a logic stream that sounds
absolutely.
great, and
Hmm.
then slip in something at the end that doesn't fit with it, but because you've developed that logic path and you've taken others down it, true or not, they're going to
Hmm.
accept your final conclusion or whatever. And this
So
is
true.
how do you how do you find the opportunity to discern, right? Because we have, it's not just our heads, it's our entire body
Hmm.
that is an instrument for reception and transmission.
Mhm.
How did you find it, and where in your body, because the indigenous philosophy that's as old as the Vedas probably, that are, uh, the gut, the heart, and the head,
Mhm.
the three brains. The first brain is the gut, second brain is the heart, third brain is the head. And they encourage the processing of information in that order because we feel with the gut, intuition,
Mhm.
we discern with the heart,
Mhm.
then we can make choices that are
Mhm.
relevant to
Mhm.
our head.
Mhm.
So how did you in this process? I'm going to go back to you mentioned having, being hospitalized for depression, and pardon me for
Mhm.
diving into this, but I think you're willing.
Mhm.
How did you find yourself prior to entering the hospital, and then the process that you went through in to ascend from that?
Mhm. I think looking back, I would not have even believed that I was depressed because for me, the definition was someone who doesn't do anything. They don't have the motivation to get up, to get dressed.
I can't
That's
see you
one
being
thing.
any of those things.
Right. So it just wasn't my reality. So I just never even, it didn't even cross my radar that I was functionally depressed.
Hmm.
So I was in this space of not getting enough sleep, not thinking logically. I would sleep, maybe 4 hours a night. I was
Well,
always,
15 kids is kind of
yeah,
hard, right?
crazy. In between nursing, some of these kids were infants, and it was this cycle of, being in a container, trying to do things the same way, even though the variables were changing. So I make
Oh, that
the
sounds like
analogy.
Einstein's can't solve problems with the same thinking that created them, right?
Exactly. So coming from a small family, being an only child, we would have systems and ways that we would do things.
Hmm.
And as the family got bigger, we still have the same system. So I use the analogy of, I start out with a 5 passenger vehicle. The family grows, and instead of getting maybe a 15 passenger, I'm still trying to drive this 5 passenger vehicle with and putting everybody
And
in it.
cram them all inside. It's like the
Right.
prom routine, right? Trying to jump in the VW, right?
Exactly. So, not really because I'm just moving and just trying to get through a day.
Hmm.
That mentality of just having that narrow view of looking at making it through a day rather than long-term planning or being able to have that space to get out of my own head.
Hmm.
It really was a recipe for disaster because I was always coming from a situation of being depleted. I
Hmm.
was never in a space of refueling, replenishing, restoring,
Sure.
resetting.
Well, you're kind of like, who was it? The Lao Tzu, I think, that said something about if you're depressed, you're in the past. If you're anxious, you're in the future.
Mhm.
Be present, and neither one of those exist.
Exactly. And there, you know what? Being present, we were talking about harvesting.
Hmm.
Um, the present is the only time you have to plant a seed. You can't do it in the past, you can't do it in the future you have right now.
Right.
And a lot of times we miss that where it's the planting of a seed of a new idea, a business, a relationship. These things are missed because we are not at our best to
Hmm.
be able to focus on that particular time and moment.
Absolutely. Now,
And
the arguments would
yeah.
say, some say, well, what about the future? Wait, can you still plan, strategize, do all those things? Absolutely. That's what you
Hmm.
do in the present.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then you execute.
It's true. Yeah. So having that whole mindset, I mean, how many people do we know that, you tell them to write it down and it's just never done?
Right.
And it's evident in their behavior because,
Guilty.
yeah, talking is not the same as doing. I don't know where we got that from, but talking is really not the thing. And I think, I have gone through a reframe to where I love what you said earlier before we were hit record about how, you wake up with a mindset, and that mindset is so fragile that it's important to document that. Because when you document it, it can give you the way to execute. And I didn't
Absolutely.
learn
Well,
that.
you're in that waking state. In psychology,
Exactly.
it's called the liminal space.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what that means is that the separation between the inner and outer worlds is really, really thin and it spills
Hmm.
over.
Hmm.
So in this interconnectedness and recognizing, like the Vedas said, we're all divine threads incarnate, capable, connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well, in that, then there's this whole universe of infinite intelligence specific to us
Hmm.
that we can ask questions of.
Hmm.
And this resolves in thoughts that come out of the blue, dreams, visions, all these kinds of things that we rarely pay attention or even second, get we generally just go, oh, that was interesting and move on without realizing those subtle impressions
Hmm.
are the most important in how this inner and outer communication network works. Now, how did you experience this? Because I know you have. It's obvious from how you speak. How did this process unfold for you in the understanding? What did you recognize as constraints? And then what did you recognize as the doors?
Yeah, I think for the constraints, it was really uh, through reading and really getting that quiet time with myself.
Hmm.
Because you mentioned the whole connection between the gut, heart, and mind. And that was out of alignment for so long that I didn't even realize it. So I had to get back in touch with, my own feelings and understanding them and even defining them for myself.
So
So,
important. And
yeah.
yet so many of us just we don't take the time to do so because we feel so
Hmm.
compelled to dominate and control and succeed.
Yes. And I think the fear of being alone with yourself is like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? What monster is going to appear?
Right.
I don't know. How is that just,
Well,
for,
like you and I, you grew up in the country. I grew up in a rural community, not too
hmm.
many people around. There was a woods a half a mile away that I spent the majority of days in when I
Hmm.
wasn't in school. And so there's this, I love being alone. I love how I am with me.
Hmm.
And why do you think that others have such a difficult time of being with themselves and loving themselves in that way?
Yeah. I think one, we're conditioned to always be stimulated, whether it is TV, radio, some people can't even go to sleep at night without having the TV on, right?
Mm.
Or a light or something. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there are moments when we have negative thoughts or reminders about the past, or, you could remember a sad situation with a friend, an argument. We don't face hard things
Mhm.
sometimes. We want to push them under the rug. So,
Now, when you do face that, that's a perfect example.
mhm.
What's the internal process? Do you waller in it, or do you just look at it and go, huh, okay, I'm not going to go down that road today?
Right. Well, see, I think we have a little bit of both, right? Sometimes we wallow in it.
Because the emotion's still there.
Right. So what happens is, I was explaining this to my daughter the other day, is that, we can have an emotion that appears that is associated with a story that's old. And so what we do is we bring new information into that old story and attach it to that emotion, which allows us to wallow in it. So if I was embarrassed the last time that I did an interview, I don't know, I'm just using this as an example. And
I can't imagine you being embarrassed, but okay.
so then I come up with all these different things. Oh my gosh, something happens. So then I attach it to that, as proof about the embarrassment. And then I wallow in it because I keep on. But then there's also the things where, you have a revelation about something and then you don't want to address it. I mean, I was like on both sides of those.
Hmm.
Because it took me 3 times a hospitalization to get myself together. Because the first and second time, I didn't want
Third
to
time's the charm,
address it.
right?
Right. But I didn't want to address it. So I was going through the motions, but I was trying to put it in the closet, lock it in Pandora's box, believing that I could go on life without even acknowledging it because it was a bad part of my life that I wanted to forget. But it
Hmm.
wasn't until I realized that that experience made me who I am today. And I can accept the good things about that story and not let the bad things overshadow that.
Sure, sure.
Mhm,
Do you have any mental tricks that you use for um in had the same kind of things happen to me, right?
mhm,
We all do. For me, and I don't remember when this happened, just one day I saw that I was headed down a wrong thinking path,
mhm,
right? Or one that just wasn't congruent with what ought to be in my
mhm,
own belief system. So was having some cognitive dissonance happening.
mhm,
When I recognized a certain thought that came up that was really or could have taken me down a really negative path,
mhm,
I paused, recognized the thought, first of all, and I stopped.
mhm,
And I had the presence to just stop and go, hmm. And at the same time, this natural desire to just simply say, I, it's like I took an in breath and thought,
mhm,
I. And it had this frequency that went along with it that just took everything out of that wasn't congruent or harmonious.
mhm,
And at the same time, then on the out breath, I used M. And
mhm,
just that simple process of recognizing the thought, stopping it, converting into that space of non-thinking and yet using the I am to just recenter. Because it didn't matter
mhm,
what was going to come. I just knew that going down the path that had began wasn't going to serve anybody, and especially.
mhm.
And so I'd heard, in my early spiritual training, and Jesus said, I am. And so, it's kind of I am, and the rest is up to your discretion
Mhm.
or discernment, depending.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, true. Mhm.
How did you, when you, what did you recognize was the greatest benefit immediately and long term in recognizing this process within yourself and reconnecting with that inner awareness and for lack of better, truth that you knew?
Mhm. There were a couple things. I think the thing that really stands out the most is forgiving myself, because the way that I was so hard on myself was because of the idea of believing that perfection was possible. Now, we talk about nobody's perfect, but in my mind, I held myself to a higher standard.
Hmm.
So people could compliment me, but it was not louder than the voice that was going on in my own head. So I had to learn to forgive myself. And that was when I was able to trust and reframe a lot of things for myself
Hmm.
because, it didn't matter what other people were saying. They could give me all kind of compliments, and I was not a person that was moved by a lot of flattery or material things because, growing up as an only child, I had everything,
Oh
all
yeah.
the material possessions, but I was still lonely because I had no one to share it with, no siblings. Now I had a lot of
I
friends. I was
can't
very,
imagine others who could relate to that.
yeah,
Right.
I was
We all
very,
can.
yeah. So I was very, always busy interacting, building relationships, staying active. So, that to me has never really been a challenge. I'm always used to juggling a lot of things because, that was the
Well, you
thing.
had to. Your life was
Yeah.
that. When you got that many
Hmm.
kids and work and um, uh,
Yeah.
the household, relationships, and the world
Hmm.
outside of that, there's a lot to deal with and
Absolutely.
could be extremely stressful.
Yes. And I learned, after my last hospitalization, the value of post-traumatic stress and seeing that, we are told that a lot of people associated with the military, my husband is a retired major. So,
Mm,
yes, we did experience some of that on his side, but we learned that these stressors are things that are not necessarily always related to military and that type of career path.
sure.
A death
Well, it's
in the
all dealing with
family.
the emotions, the outer
Right.
situation that happens to provoke that
Yeah.
experience,
So many
vastly
things.
different.
Yeah. And I learned that, they gave us a list of a lot of things that are trauma. And after looking at that list, I'm like, a lot of my kids experienced this in 1 year. It would be a new baby, a death in the family, moving to a different school, moving to a different house, um, all these, a change of a job. We experienced that with my husband. He would change jobs. And so the routine would get disrupted. All these things were trauma, and we're functioning as if nothing's going on.
Right.
We recently had a school shooting here in Georgia.
And
And, my heart goes out to the kids that are in this state because even though it wasn't their school, people talk about it. It wasn't their school, and they expect them to go to school without that fear that it could happen to them
right.
and not even talking to them about it. How does this make you feel? What are some things that we can do to ease your trauma? Because just because they weren't in the school that was affected, it doesn't mean they weren't affected,
Sure.
you know?
Well, as a teacher, I taught high school for a number of years, and it became apparent that we really don't address the mind, body, spirit complex of our youth. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We just look at the mind or maybe even just the body,
Mm-hmm.
stick them in a classroom, have them memorize certain things and regurgitate and test them for that. And that's how they get their grades. Well, or grades. Yet there's no, other than the natural social development that takes place,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a whole lot of guidance toward understanding the larger aspects of life and how things fit from both, that gut, heart, and head perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? How it feels, how you're perceiving, right? And
Mm-hmm.
based on how you are raised or what you experienced as a child, you're going to perceive life that way
Mm-hmm.
until you're offered an opportunity to perceive it differently. And that's not happening. We have
Mm-hmm.
this whole mind, body, spirit, soul, planet, cosmos
Mm-hmm.
relationship that we have
Mm-hmm.
that we're unaware of. Back to the Vedas, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're strewn across dimensions and planes of consciousness, and yet we're just now finding out that that possibility is actually true through quantum sciences,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is, it's going to take a while for the rest of us to catch up. However, we've got the data now that proves it so.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of data,
Mm-hmm.
how did you use the data that you got and the perceptively, or at least according to your chart, was deemed traumatic
Mm-hmm.
rather than just part of the process,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everything's a process. When you can see it, it's like that. Everything's transitory, temporary and transitory. So there's no real opportunity to latch hold and, you know, get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the stuckness that causes the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
How did you work through that? How have you used that in raising your children? Because we had a conversation last week that in prep, we thought we were going to do this show and it didn't work out. But you had, a half a dozen of your kids in the van with you. Uh,
Right.
so um, how does this transpire and how do you use that data, that awareness, that truth, and speak to your children in ways that they understand and can apply it?
Mm-hmm. I love that question because, it's not even just with children, but it's
Mhm.
with anybody that you communicate with. I think
We're all
when
kids
you,
inside.
yeah, so when you know yourself, you know where you stop and the other person begins. And that is so important with communication because it's like, the frequency of a radio station, right? You're turning the stations and it's just staticky and knowing exactly that right place to put something so that you can hear clearly.
Yeah.
The
Plays your favorite
static,
tune, right?
right? So the static comes when we are not clear about ourselves. And a lot of times, if we have that static, we project it on other people
Mhm.
instead of knowing that the control is within us to kind
Right.
of get the right foundation.
Other words for that are bias and prejudice.
Yes. So when you're in a space of understanding where you are, you can actively listen to the other person and be present. A lot of times we're distracted with maybe we are checking our messages or, we're listening to music. So we're not fully present with people. And when you are present, you can learn a lot about them just by the words that they're using.
Oh, sure. Now,
You
what's
know,
the sense? The fully present. So it's one thing. Again, talk is
hmm
great, right?
hmm
So we want to have the experience of it. That makes it relevant.
yes.
What is that experience like? For me, when in that present moment, when you really connect with each other, there are moments where you can actually feel your heart
hmm
connect and energy shifts. And it just seems like all of a sudden the environment is much warmer.
I totally agree with that, and I can give you a story about this situation. So I got connected with this gentleman on LinkedIn. I don't know how it happened, but he has this weekly room where he has networking
Hmm.
conversations around it and everything. So I went to the room for the first time. He had already been talking for a while. He had some co-hosts on stage and he asked a question. So I raised my hand and went up there. So I spoke and the people were listening. There was somebody that was in his network that heard the, conversation. So he reached out to me and invited me on a Zoom call. So there was a few words that we were speaking back and forth to each other as we were trying to coordinate when we would get on the call.
Hmm.
And we got on the call and we were talking about music. So I have two kids that do music, write their music and everything. So we went into this whole conversation. I'm giving him marketing suggestions on how to network and do things with his singing. He's a plumber by trade. That's his job. So we go back to this room again that we both
So his pipes were,
went.
were clogged, huh?
Right. So that's good. I'm gonna put that on there.
Good.
Uh he'll get a kick out of that. But anyway, we go back to the room, and before we went to the room, because we had been on our call, he's like, well, I'm always a little intimidated to get up there and speak. I'm going to sound crazy or whatever. And I said, you just got to do it. It's that inner voice, right? So we go back to the room the next week, and the guy invited people up on the stage again. And I gave him a scenario about reaching out, getting on these Zoom calls, and I told him about the gentleman that I spoke with that, I got connected to in his room. And I said, so like, for example, he loves music. And so the guy said, I cannot believe it. He said, I have been friends with this man. I talked to him in person. I've seen him several times. We have hour conversations. I never even knew he did music. This is some years. And
It's
I
hilarious.
attribute that to being present with someone, because that energy you cannot recreate, but it opens you up to such a point that you really connect with people. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's my story about the active listening and a difference it makes, because this person sees him, they connect on a regular basis, and he never even knew that he did music. He just always knew him as the plumber.
That's funny. You know, I'm sure I get that for me because I have got multiple interests and I've done a lot of things. And I would say it would take a lifetime for somebody to actually get to know what all I do. Right?
That guy, he was blown away. He was blown away. He was like, I cannot believe it. I've
Well, the
known him for all
music,
these
though,
years.
that's really, we are all pieces of music.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, if you're a musician, for me, I've been a progressive drummer for 40 some odd years.
Mm-hmm.
And in that place, that style of music is usually improvisational.
Mm.
So the sense, the feeling, the listening, the conversation, the eye contact with the other musicians
Mm-hmm.
that give you indications that, the phrasing is going to change, or we're going to start a new topic, or
Mm-hmm.
or I'm going to add, some exclamation points to what the point that was just made, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And it's just magnificent to be able to be in that place. Of course, you have to master your art and your instrument first
Yes.
to be able to do that. You can't do it by being able to just read sheet music and play.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother embodiment of that, if you.
True. Yeah.
So in that,
Again. Yeah. Again, that knowing of yourself, right? Um,
is it knowing or is it just letting go
now that's true too. You know,
and
that's
trusting?
true
Because that
too.
therein is the trust factor.
Trusting. Yeah, like again, if we don't forgive ourselves or love ourselves, it's going to be hard for us to trust ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
We second guess ourselves. I mean, for me, even when now being in a space where I feel like I really know myself, there's times that I second guess. It's like, is this really right? Am I just really coming from the right? So, I mean, you know what I mean? We
Well, and
go
it's
through that.
important to do that. That's
Yeah,
critical thinking.
yeah, yeah, true.
Question yourself. Be willing to put your truth on the chopping block and whack
This is
away at
true.
it.
This is true. That's the way to honesty.
Yeah.
Because you can't trust something that is not honest. It's like being
And
on
you
a
feel it.
wobbly, right?
It
You
may
can't
be a
take the next
subtle
step.
difference, but
Yeah,
it's there.
yeah. Something's wobbly. I feel you. Yeah,
Yeah. Weevils wobble, but they don't fall down.
right. Mm-hmm.
And so in saying that's kind of like, okay, so we wobble, but we do have the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We are in our bodies, we are in our heart, in our minds, and we
Mm-hmm.
have questions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that because of who you are, that your kids are able to be more authentic in their own questioning and conversations and ability to peer into those places where it may not have been wise to do so in the past?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I really commend my kids for having the confidence to speak their truth, to ask questions. There is that level of I don't want to say naivety, but it's
I
I
think
don't know.
that's true.
Okay, well, yeah, it's like, they just have this innocence
Hmm.
about being able to ask anything. And I just remember just being a kid, there were certain things that even though it might be appropriate to ask, I just feel like, oh my gosh, it's taboo. I would have never asked,
I get
certain,
in trouble for asking.
yeah. So, it's like,
Why do we think, noticing that, why
mhm.
do we think that questions are adversarial?
Because I have learned from my upbringing that questions could be a level of disrespect. I was not taught, how to question in a way that, which is why I love podcasting and
Right.
interviewing
Well,
now.
in our era,
Be-
it's like, don't question, just do.
Right. I'm like,
Do what
hey,
you're
yeah,
told. Don't ask questions.
exactly. You don't ask questions.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful because in some aspects we may not know how to phrase the question,
Mhm.
but it's still important that we get the answer, right? But it was like a all or nothing extreme type thing when I was raised. I'm the adult, you're the child, you don't question me. It was like I'm being disrespectful if I'm questioning
But then you had
as
a guy
opposed
a
to
couple
seeking
thousand years
insight.
ago that says, "Be ye as little children,
Yeah.
curious,
Mm-hmm.
right? Inquire."
Yeah.
And yet, even at our age, we realize, okay, so because of what we went through, we realized how fallacious it
Mm-hmm.
was. And now we're trying to impart that wisdom back to the younger generations
Mm-hmm.
because we missed it.
Right.
Now that
Well,
we know we missed it, we can adjust and create other opportunities that allow children to understand and integrate with this greater potential.
so true. Well, and I think, in school, we're conditioned, again, not to question. It's said, hey, there's no such thing as a dumb question, raise your hand. But if you ask too many questions, you're annoying, okay? Or whatever
Right.
the case is, you begin to associate questions. If someone is really asking a lot of questions, that their level of knowledge is not there. So it's like you feel like, oh, this person might be special needs because
Mhm.
they're asking a lot of questions. They just don't get it. Something is not clicking. So there's just a number of things that, again, we've been conditioned
Right. And
to
teachers will
think.
take that as annoying rather than, okay, I'm going to take some time because if these questions are coming up, even though they seem so simple, and usually most questions are when we get to the core
Hmm.
of them, then let's spend some time because here's a teachable moment, not only
Hmm.
for this student, but for the entire class. And
Absolutely.
then afterwards, do a recap about, okay, what just happened and why? And what did you experience? And how did it make a difference for you?
So true. But see, again, we're back to knowing where we start and other people end, because I take it as if a classroom has a lot of questions, it may not be the students, it could be the
Yeah, am I not doing my
presentation.
job, right?
Where's the disconnect? You
Yeah,
know
yeah.
what I mean? So for me, when people ask me questions, I like to go back to the root. Okay, now where did we get disconnected? Because it's seeming like it's simple to me, but did I miss a step? And it can happen. You could
Oh,
just
sure.
assume, oh, you know what, this formula has four parts. I totally skipped over the third part. I mean, it
Well,
happened.
and that word you just used, the assume, The
Yes.
old thing of don't assume you make an ass out of
That's
you
out of
and
you and me.
um, it's so true. And yet, most of us are so reluctant
Mm-hmm.
to ask the questions, to clarify.
Yes,
It's just like, and it's not that we're assuming, it's just we don't want to appear stupid.
exactly. Yeah. And where did that belief even come from? See, that's what I'm
I
saying.
would
We've been programmed.
say, I know that's a rhetorical question, but I would say it probably came from a patriarchally driven system that wants dominance and control over all.
Amen. Amen. Totally agree.
So how do we rise above that in this coming, let's call it a new time, because the old time kind of ended with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Some say it ended in 2012 with the Mayan calendar, and we started a new time then, of
Mm-hmm.
which COVID was simply the rising up of everything that wasn't congruent so that we could all have some sequestered time to take a look
Mm-hmm.
and examine ourselves and the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we move forward, what do you think are the keys and tools or um, advice, I guess, that we can offer that will help us seek a greater harmony among people and planet? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's really what we've been longing for.
Absolutely. Um, I think for myself, it is being the example of what living in harmony looks like. A lot of people think that living in harmony is about everything being perfect, no problems, everybody getting along, kumbaya. Not true.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it is knowing, so many things we've talked about that people could write a master class on. I hope they were taking notes. But like recognizing things that are not in alignment with you, that alone is huge. And when we recognize that, if we remove judgment, but allow ourselves to to discern and make a decision,
Right.
we would be a lot
Assessments.
better off, right?
Yeah.
Because, just because you discern something doesn't mean you have to judge it. I think that's the problem. A lot of people figure
Because
out,
we don't know what's going on with the other person. They're acting
right,
apparently well or aberrantly. Excuse me. That just means there's something else going on there that we have no clue about.
exactly. It's
So
true.
why would if we were in that situation, would we want somebody to judge us because we had a bad day?
It's so true. And the minute that you get away from that, you begin to ask different questions. If you knew that somebody was acting out of character, or whether you knew them or not, is there something that I can help you with right now? We ask better questions. Are we really willing to serve? Are we really willing to, in the moment, be that example for somebody?
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people say that they are, but then they don't want to practice it. They want it to be this easy
Again,
going. Yeah,
the talk and the walk are
exactly. No accountability.
disparate, right?
Yeah. So I think when we learn to really embody that, we're gonna do things differently. You can't keep doing the same thing expecting different results.
Hmm.
You know, it's gonna take you being quiet. It's gonna take you entertaining someone else's perspective, because the thing about it also is, with this discernment, is when you remove judgment, you can be on the frequency that the person is on. So the things that you say with them on that frequency, it's about where they're at and what they are believing and what they can see. You'll be able to use that language, and you can communicate,
Hmm.
and they can make the choice on if they want to be in harmony or not. But a
Exactly.
lot of times people aren't on the same frequency, right? We can discern, oh my gosh, that person is not on my level. Okay, I don't have time for it, and we just go the other way instead of remembering that we were on that level at some time.
Hmm.
And we might be on that level in a different space today. The same day, we could find ourselves where they were.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah,
Now
taking
that
that
brings up
time.
the notion of patterns, right?
Yes.
Because these are
Mm-hmm.
all patterns of behavior that we're unaware of
Yeah.
initially. When
Yes.
we become aware, then that gives us the ability to change
Mm-hmm.
and choose a different thought or behavior in the moment. However, and I love how T. Harv Eker put this. I met him years ago, and he says, "What you do anywhere, you do
Mm-hmm.
everywhere."
Mm-hmm.
Now, do we recognize that? And
Mm-hmm.
in this perception of chaos around it, is it just that we're not able to see our own patterns in it that have created a different perfect order than we
Mm-hmm.
want? And then changing that order? Because, as you say, we strive for perfection. Well, what's perfection? It's being in the moment and available.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing
Well,
beyond that, in my opinion.
I love that because, see, this is the thing. People have their own definitions of stuff.
Hmm.
So if we think, oh, what's success? For me, success may be working 2 or 3 days a week for like 4 hours and I'm done,
Right.
right? For somebody else, they want to travel, they want to do all these different things. That's success for them. And that's the issue. We are not on the same frequency.
Sure. Sure.
We got to be on the same frequency. Now, that doesn't mean that we all have to believe the same. But the
No,
only way
and
for,
that's not a prerequisite. You
right,
just have to be willing to allow other people to be
Mhm.
who they are.
It's
This is what
absolutely.
I'm operations director for a global peace movement called Live and Let Live,
Mm-hmm.
liveandletlive.org if the audience want to look it up. And we have two principles, a moral and a legal. The moral is be an excellent human, just be
Mm-hmm.
the best you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then the legal is don't aggress. And our long-term commitment is to calibrate the law to remove aggression. Now, with
Mm-hmm.
those two things, live and let live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to live in freedom without constraints, as long as you're not aggressing towards another
Mm-hmm.
or causing, substantial risk of harm,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to allow them the same.
I
Can
love
we
that.
do that? Can we
Mm-hmm.
really do that?
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. Because so many people, I think again, when we're talking about judgment, because see, when you remove that, um, judgment is the idea that someone's right and someone's wrong, right?
Hmm.
And I tell people there's more than one hamburger place. Okay. That means there are so many different perspectives. When we have this extreme belief that it's the wrong way and a right way, we may never intersect with other people in a real conversation because that aggression is going to be there. But if you open your mind to say, hey, there are thousands of perspectives, there's thousands of beliefs. When you
Right.
just start thinking abundantly, you're like, I don't have time for judgment, because I don't have all the facts. I'm not the judge and jury because I people don't know what they don't know for one. You can you can give them the riot act, ask them all kind of questions. What happens? We have things that we've been traumatized before that we don't even believe that's in the subconscious.
Right.
So I don't care if you're questioning people. They may believe that what they're telling you is true and it could be still not right. So it's
Sure.
not about that. It's about connecting with people. And again, like you said, removing that aggression. And that comes from letting go of judgment.
Hmm.
Okay. That's what I
Yeah.
say.
For years, oh gosh, 20 years, I facilitated building road, bridge, and waterway construction projects. And the
Mm-hmm.
construction industry is notoriously adversarial, or was.
Mm-hmm.
Partnering sessions were introduced in the 90s here in Arizona. We were the first to institute them. And it went from, I think, 19 million in litigation to less than a million in 2 years as a result of that. And so these kinds of principles, when you bring, I've had anywhere from 20 to 80 people in the room, and the ego's left at the door. There's no ego without ego. It's about jobarchy, which means the job is the boss and everybody wins. So then the process is taking the group through a series of paradigm shifts, first recognizing what the paradigms are and just acknowledge them. So you're not pointing out anybody, right? You're just saying, here's the playing field that we've been working on. And here's our four agreements, basically: commitment, commitment, communication, trust, and issue resolutions, right? Or communication.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I said that, but it's been a while since I've done it. Fact is, when you set things up in a process like that, you can get everybody on the same page because they're all working towards the same contractual agreement
Mm-hmm.
without the ego.
Love that.
And so there's this, I mean, it still services. There were people who want to push their own personal agendas or didn't think that something was right or whatever. However, with the skillful crafting of the conversation to unfold what that issue is truly about, and then it's like it automatically resolves itself.
Mm-hmm.
They talk through their own issue to reach the place of agreement to participate in a greater harmony with the group. And it's amazing how these things take place. And if we just apply these things to, politics today, wow. How do
Yeah.
you, in the aspects of moving into the future, how do you see, or what do you think are some of the key, or maybe even the key aspect that you could advise others to consider for their own benefit?
I would say, this world is about us understanding that we need each other. And having that clarity of knowing who you are can help you be a better contributor to that relationship.
Okay.
I think a lot of times we don't show up authentically because we're trying to be the person that we think other people want us to be, rather than truly recognizing who we are.
The
So if
core of codependence.
yeah, and so you're always setting yourself up for disaster because you're not fully optimized. You're going into these relationships always feeling like you're not enough,
Yeah, you
you
need
know?
to update your hard drive, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is a recipe for disaster. I've been there, done that. It's a road going nowhere. So when you learn that to accept who you are, the gifts and the flaws alike, you will understand that um, you'll be able to have transparent conversations that help you to be vulnerable, recognizing that your flaws are different than somebody else's flaws.
Mhm.
Your strengths are somebody else's flaws and vice versa. So understanding that, it helps you to again know that there's not a right and a wrong.
Sure.
It just is the and. We have too much
Key point.
comparison.
It's
Yeah,
not a but, it's an and.
absolutely. That's a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now,
Mhm.
speaking of game changers, what do you see in the future? How do you see us as a society evolving toward any semblance of harmony among people and planet?
Yeah.
Or do you?
Right. Well, that's a tricky question because I think, I see what I desire,
Hmm. How
and
true.
that takes work. Okay. So I don't see the news because I don't watch it. So when other people are just on a frenzy around some of these political conversations or whatever the case is, I get a filtered down version. So filtered that by the time I get in conversation with them, I ask them a question, they don't even want to have the conversation anymore because it's that vulnerability and upfront about looking at yourself in the mirror about some of these things. It's
Right.
easy to get on the
And
bandwagon
you
of
expose the
everybody.
polarization immediately.
Exactly. Exactly. So again, I see a lot of harmony because I remove myself from the foolishness, but there may not be very many people in that harmony state. But, for me, it has been a game changer because I have conversations like this, right? I connect with the people that fuel me to keep on with that belief. And I'm good. I have them on a regular basis. It may not be all day, every day, but for me, having a great conversation, like I'm taking notes, right? Because I may not have another conversation like this till, maybe a week from now. But this is enough to keep me going till that
You
next
honor
time.
me. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time today, LaChelle. This has been a wonderful conversation full of insight and wisdom from both of us to each other and for others.
Yes.
That's what we're after, right?
Absolutely.
Pure enjoyment.
Absolutely. Well,
So
I have really
good.
enjoyed this, really, and I'm excited for what's coming next, you know?
Me too.
hmm
And thank you.
You are so welcome.
And namaste and in la catch. And thank you all for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.